Okay, alright.
Hello and welcome back to the Make Lemonade podcast, the show brought to you by Lemon Squeezy as we hope to inspire you to earn money from your own lemonade stand. I'm one of your co-hosts James and I'm back here with JR Farr, co-founder of Lemon Squeezy. Today we're joined by an absolute titan of industry, Jason Cohen. He's most well known for being the co-founder of WP Engine. You might also know him as a smart bear on Twitter and from his popular blog with the same name, started almost 2 decades ago. Jason is a 2-time unicorn founder, so has some incredible startup wisdom at all stages of growth. This is a wide-ranging conversation where we talk about Jason's day-to-day life at WP Engine, how he deals with big business problems, if his writing's done on time at WP Engine, how he would scale to $1 million if he was starting from scratch, and we also get his thoughts on Lemon Squeezy's growth going into 2024. Let's get into this episode with Jason Cohen.
Okay, alright.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us on the pod. Now, a lot of people know about your time at WP Engine, but I want to start off by getting to know you as a person. How do you spend your free time and what do you do for fun outside of work?
Probably the hobby I spend the most time on is writing. I play the piano, which I've done since I was 7, so I do that almost every day. And I like chess. I play chess, but I'm not good at it. It's one of these things where I had to learn to accept that it's okay to be bad at this. So I'm like 1100 on chess.com, which means much lower fee day. Well, I don't even know what it is, but much lower. 700 probably. Like I don't know what that is, really in real numbers. So it's bad. And you might say like, oh, but there's a lot of worse people. There are, but if you saw the amount of hours that I've watched videos, did courses, tried to learn lines, tried to analyze stuff, played games, did puzzles, and if you added up the thousands of hours that I've done that, then you should be unimpressed.
So it sounds like you turn your hobbies into work, Jason.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you let loose? Do you let loose on chess and piano, or they're like quite regimented hobbies? How do you let your hair down?
I don't let them be regimented. In other words, I don't say like, I've got to play every day. In fact, I was playing chess a lot 6 months ago, and then I realized, oh, I'm letting this stress me out. I'm like getting really upset at myself if I do a stupid move. I was like, oh, no. And I just stopped. And I just like didn't play. I haven't played a game in like 4 months. Like, no. I'm not. This is not supposed to be stress. So it's not too regimented. I just disengage if it's going to be like that.
Anyway, Jason, thank you for being here. It's a real privilege to have you on.
Well, thanks so much. It's fun. And I mean, I'm sure you know how rare and awesome it is to build what you've built. I mean, the idea of like, we're growing so fast, like, I don't even want this term sheet, Right. So I don't know if that's top 0.1%. I don't even know. I have no clue, but it's, it's probably that order of magnitude of what you're doing. One of the things I found in scaling WP Engine is the scaling phase is the part where you can't find information.
It's funny. In Slack, the last thing I posted was your scale article.
Yeah.
That's all I'm thinking about right now.
Yeah, and even that is more complaining and not a lot of answers, right? I mean, I have some answers, but that particular article was like, well, hey, it's hard, okay? Like this kind of message.
It's really hard.
But let's detail why, because maybe that's the beginning of figuring out what to do or what to expect or what to attack, right? But there's a lot of material of like, let's start a company. And I'm not trying to belittle it. I'm just saying there's a lot of it. I mean, you can buy 1 billion books, a lot of courses on like just starting. And there's actually quite a lot of material on at scale. Every Harvard Business School case study is, Southwest Airlines is already $1 billion, and lots of books written by famous CEOs and business people, and they're good, by the way. Like I'm not, once again, not belittling or putting it down at all. Fascinating, but just totally irrelevant to a startup or the scaling phase. Just irrelevant. Here's how Jack Welch turned around GE. It's like amazing and also completely irrelevant to me. Yeah. So it's not that there's nothing at all. I would argue like Amp It Up is probably a handbook for the scale. Hard Thing About Hard Things, not exactly a handbook per se, but certainly commiseration. Jim Collins, although again a lot of it is already at scale, I would say a lot of that applies very nicely to being at scale. Like, hey, we're going to have to start bringing some of these concepts in here. So it's not that there's nothing, but I would say it really drops off a cliff, and there's not a lot of bloggers, quote unquote, or that sort of thing, right? And even for me, Some of my stuff is a little bit, maybe, but like largely not necessarily, really. And I would say again, I would cross-apply that observation that a lot of these things I'm not sure just applies automatically. So I think you can say stuff like, here's a good way to interview customers if you don't even have a product. Here's what you should ask, here's how you do it. Not that everyone ought to do the one thing, but it probably works for most people. Like, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. I don't know if that same kind of thing works at scale. Like, oh, just do your executive team meetings like this. Like, maybe, but I'm starting to feel a little more like me. Well, I certainly want to hear the idea. Maybe we'll try it on, but I'm not, a lot of times for teams at WP Engine, I would even use the words trying on like clothes. So I'd say like, hey, for the next month or quarter or whatever, here's a way we could run our meetings, or here's how we could do our planning for the quarter, and let's just try this on like clothes. And whether it's a month or a quarter or however long we want to give it, we'll just stop and we'll go like, well, what do we think? Do we like how this fits? We just need to tailor it a little bit more, but like directionally this is right? Or are we like, no? And we're like, great, we'll just rip it off and try something else. Like, that's what we're going to do. Because we got to do something. Like, it's not working the way it's going, or we're not happy, it could be better. So let's just agree to try on some clothes, and no one has to worry if you don't like it that this is forever. Let's just try it on. And in that way, we were able to experiment with things with sort of the right attitude. So that's an example of maybe an attitude that probably cross-applies fairly well. Just the attitude does, But some of the details. Okay, but still, maybe more ideas for like, all right, give me some clothes to try. I get it; it might not work, but let me try putting that on. I'll just see. Even that might be good. So I do feel like there's a dearth of that. Anyway, so that could certainly be interesting and not well worn yet.
Absolutely. I love that.
JR, I wanted to quiz you a little bit on WordPress and the state of it right now. Just before we got on recording, we were looking at the sort of almost stagnation of WordPress growth. Do you sort of see that as stagnation, or you just hit a point where the new ones aren't going to sort of eat much into the market share? It's just going to sort of stay there in terms of the amount of WordPress sites on the web?
If you want to call WordPress growth stagnant, then you have to call Google and Facebook's growth stagnant too, in that they have this large percentage of everyone who's online. And there's some maximum number of percentage of everyone who's online that you're probably going to have. And so that's called a carrying capacity usually in the terminology. Has WordPress hit its carrying capacity? Maybe, but at 43% of the internet, that's an enormous market. And also, it's of the internet. And you does the internet grow? Okay, so if so, then it's a large and growing market. Now, there are lots of alternatives, and there's more good alternatives now than ever before. That's also true. And so whether it's the other, like, sort of everything in a box CMSs, like the Wixes and the Squarespaces, Webflows of the world, or specific things like the Shopifys of the world where it's specific to e-commerce, or verticals like Toast Tab, if it's for restaurants. So those are all great products in their own right. So there is more stuff than ever for people to do, and I imagine there's going to be more and more over time as well. But you could look at it another way. Despite all of these great competitors, none of which really existed in any meaningful form, say 10 years ago, WordPress still continued to grow that entire time as a percentage of the internet to 43%. So that's just an incredible momentum. Yeah, like you don't want to be flippant and say WordPress will always be the dominant thing forever and everything's fine forever. You don't want to say that, but I think saying like it's stalled is probably too far of the pendulum swinging the other direction and characterizing what's happening.
I think it's a great answer because there's a lot of stuff floating around. You'll see Matt Mullenweg come in and defend it. You'll see people throwing out the W3 site and stats, and so. I thought it'd be, I think it's an interesting question for you because, at the end of the day, WordPress is tied to WP Engine and I'm just curious how you think about that. Maybe it's nothing to think about, but like you said, I think that does come a point where there's a lot of new things now more than ever that are, I guess they're considered decent alternatives to WordPress. And especially with some of the changes with Gutenberg and things like that, how does that impact things? And so I think... to dive a little bit further, you're obviously at another level from I'm trying to get from 0 to 1 million, right? You are at another level. So taking that same strategy idea and where the market is and what you're kind of up against. What does your day look like, Jason? I mean, we all know you as a smart bearer and the writer and the just the savant, that just talks about all these amazing things. But what is Jason doing on a daily basis? And as you go into 2024, I'm actually curious to hear from you.
Yeah, well, you're right I think everybody needs a strategy, meaning the way that they say they're going to win in their own way and with their own definition of win as well. But like broadly speaking, how are you going to do your thing? Yeah, in our case, being at scale and asking how do you grow from here, there's questions like how many products should we have as opposed to, hey, how do we make this one product really work? So there's just different kinds of questions to answer things like how do we scale from here? Now, fortunately, we're growing, we're profitable, so in those ways we're sort of safe and healthy. That's nice. But of course, it's a challenge to ask where do you go from here? So, for example, asking what other products we should have is a critical question for us because at scale, just like adding another feature is not how you're going to add another 100 million in ARR. So that's going to have to be another product, maybe product line. There's many ways to get that. You could build one, you could acquire one, you could partner in order to create one. Those all become rational things to do. In fact, we have acquired several companies. There's also the question of how do you pick the second or third product? On what basis? But of course, if you're starting out, that's not the question. The question is, hey, where are the customers? How come they're not here? How come they're over there? How come they try it and they tell me they like it and then they don't buy? What's going on? And how come they leave in droves? That's not good. I mean, these are the kinds of questions you have early on. And it's not like one's better or more difficult per se, but they're simply different kinds of puzzles to solve, right?
And so how are you spending your days, Jason? What is it? Are you sitting around in meetings talking strategy? Are you actually doing any work? Are you writing for your blog? How does it look?
Yeah, so we are often working on strategy, whether it's for the company as a whole or a particular product or product line. So whether I'm leading that sometimes or helping or facilitating sometimes, I still do that quite a bit. In my particular case, I'm leaning into some of our corporate data initiatives, which means bringing together all the internal data we have and building the systems around that, which is maybe kind of boring to say. I think it's fun because I like data, but even just things like bringing it together, testing it, normalizing it, making it connected from all these different systems, managing the infrastructure of that, making it possible for other people to access it, for engineers or analysts so that they can query it directly, and for folks that are less technical, can they use other kinds of business intelligence tools to use it? So this might be kind of boring for this podcast, but that's some of the stuff that I'm working on is helping those teams do that.
I don't think that that's boring at all. I think it's sometimes you're hitting on a good point, which is a lot of times people want to focus on the sexy stuff that they think is going to move it, but sometimes it's some of those things that are actually really boring that make the difference, even at your scale or our scale. So I actually think that's a good point, that sometimes even some of these, as you're just starting out, it's okay to be boring for a little bit.
I would say two more things on that. One is boring, or if you extend to the crap you don't want to do, most of life is that. If you're writing code, there's a lot of boilerplate or troubleshooting or stuff like that. If you're in a band, you spend a lot of time practicing and not that much time on stage relative to that, or scheduling a gig or trying to get one and having no money, traveling around, and then an amp breaks. Most of it is shit. And then sometimes you're on stage and it's that's why we're doing this. And so that's how a startup is. And a lot of things in life are. Most of it is drudgery, whether it's boring or just you don't want to. The other thing I would say is exactly because certain things are boring, there may be an advantage there to be had. So when I started WP Engine, a lot of people said, because this is not my first startup, so a lot of people said, wait, you've already had success, you've sold it, you could do whatever you want, you can self-fund whatever you want. Why are you doing something boring like hosting? Why are you doing something boring, And to me personally, it's not boring, because I love optimization and scaling of tech. That's just fun for me. And so other people saw that as that's drudgery and hosting is not even legit. It's barely even legitimate software. I think what a lot of people were thinking, as opposed to DevOps at the time, this is 14 years ago, DevOps is the cool new kind of software development. turning infrastructure into software is the cool stuff. And I personally love trying to tweak out an extra 50 milliseconds out of Nginx because of this thing and blah, 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 blah. Like, I like that. And so here's something where other people find boring. But since I found it fascinating and the market existed for this particular boring thing to exist, people wanted to pay for this boring thing to happen, that allowed me to do something that so many other entrepreneurs didn't do because it's not cool or it's boring. That gave me an edge just because I wanted to do something other people find boring. So it's almost like an example of like, if you let your freak flag fly, then you will do something that almost everyone else won't, for whether it's not cool or whether it's boring or whether they, whatever the reason is. And that's already a built-in advantage. Now, it doesn't mean you automatically have a company because maybe no one else cares. So maybe no one wants to buy that. So, all right, it's not the only thing needed for success. But shouldn't you at least start there? What is it that I love, that I'm passionate about? And ideally, if other people don't like it, that's great. That means it's special. Perfect. What a good place to begin. Now, does anyone want this? Okay, different, totally orthogonal question, but okay, at least I'm starting from a good place.
It's been a long time since you were in that sort of early stage where you're starting something, but you've got a lot of knowledge about it. People are asking you a lot about it all the time. These are the questions you're getting, and you do get to talk about it in your blog. But do you ever miss that? Do you ever get that itch that those early days are fun, or the problems and challenges you're solving now, they suit you and where you're at in your life?
Yeah, sometimes, but then I remember all the work. And,
yeah, it's a lot.
No, but like that 24/7, everything all the time, it is very exciting. And I wouldn't give up anything, but I'm just older now, and it's also interesting to have new kinds of puzzles to work on. That's interesting as well. And so ultimately, no, I don't want to actually go back and do that full time. I don't want to start another company. But I also do get to scratch that itch partially at WP Engine because we launched new products. So we launched Atlas a year and a half ago, and I'm not trying to sell anything here, of course, but I'm just saying we launched this new product 2.5 years ago, which is adjacent to WordPress, but not entirely WordPress. But it's still in the realm of making websites, and it's a headless WordPress system. And so it's super fun, and back to unknown, and people didn't, are people going to use it? And it's hard to convert to that, and how do we compete against some of the incumbents, and it's all that stuff. We have another product now that's a search product, which is just launched like 6 months or less than 6 months ago, and there's all kinds of interesting things there, especially with AI and things. Again, I'm sure we don't want to talk about AI. I don't really want to talk about AI, but the point is there's stuff in there that's legitimate. Like if we already have all of our customers' content indexed for the purpose of search, why wouldn't you then apply AI to it, whatever that may mean? So it is natural and actually makes sense. And so here's ways in which I'm able to work on or participate in new products where, again, like the part that's like a startup is that, will customers want it? What should it be? How will that morph? What's happening with competitors? That's changing really fast. Nobody knows what the future is like. Those are all true. So that's like a startup. Of course, it's also unlike a startup. We have money, we have teams, we have almost 200,000 customers, which means we can sell things into the base. We can ask questions. If we just send a random survey and 0.5% answer it, that's like, thousands of answers. Like, it's fantastic. Like every startup wishes they could have that kind of feedback, right? Last time we did that, we asked, would you be willing to hop on a call also and talk about this? And half said yes. We had like hundreds and hundreds of people, please let me talk to you about this. Again, as a startup, it's like, no one will talk to me about my thing. And here we have like way more than we could ever talk to. So on the other hand, if the products don't make millions, plural, of dollars in the first year, it's a failure. Oh, and then it needs to be making tens of millions pretty quickly. Oh, well, that is much, much harder than a startup. I mean, even a VC funded startup isn't expected to do that. So you also have these different expectations on the other end. Also, you have our brand and existing customers. We can't just put out like a really crappy MVP or whatever. Like that just doesn't work. Okay, so what does it mean to put out something fast and yet still kind of conform to the fact that we already have this reputation, brand, etc.? Or support or sales team, what are they supposed to do if we make a terrible product? That's no good. So how do you navigate that? So in those ways, it is not a startup, and that's why I actually don't like it when people say it's a startup within the startup or a startup within the company. It's like, It's not really like that. That's not what a startup
Right.
is like. So there's aspects where it is, the unknown, the aspects where it's unknown and fast changing and little is built yet, and that kind of stuff is like that. So that's fun. But I wouldn't go so far as to say it's like a startup within a company.
How do you deal with some of the I put down, how do you deal with the shit parts of big business, the stuff that sort of happens with scale, bureaucracy, politics, toxicity? It's so hard not to have that with scale. I guess you've run into it. Do you have to put anything in place to stop that?
It's unclear to me what is possible to stop or not stop, and it's unclear to me what is general advice versus things that work only in a very special case of company, maybe once ever. If not, then a lot of things have to be in place. Even things like OKRs or other kinds of management techniques like that. Of course, companies, everyone trots out the usual examples of like Google does OKRs, and if those very smart and very skeptical engineers like this, then it must be a good system. We can use it. And then almost no one's successful with OKRs, really. Almost no one. What? Like, it's that hard? Why? And so you could say that about anything. Doing meetings, strategy planning, goal setting, even running Scrum teams, how different departments talk to each other. You could cross-apply the same thing, like how come you can't just put in a method and then it works? Or, I don't get it. So my guess is that it really depends on the structure and culture of the company. And if that's not completely aligned, then a given technique doesn't work. So maybe it's more like, look, if there's 10 or 20 ways to do this and they're all fine, how do we find the one that works best for us and then, of course, continue to tweak it from there to make it really work for us? I think that's probably the thing to do in terms of like dealing with the issues. There are some general things, like of course at here's the other problem. Like, so Amazon, we all know they dealt with it by having 2 pizza teams, and then everybody talks via API, and that's it. And that's fine. And again, sometimes you find other companies that do that a little bit, but almost no one really actually does that, especially with teams outside of engineering. And then Amazon has been able to continue to experiment even at large and small scales forever at scale. But others don't. I mean, even Google doesn't. Even Facebook doesn't. So it just, it's just very hard to cross-apply any of these things. I think anytime you trot out the same 1 to 3 examples of it, that just proves it's almost impossible for it to ever happen. You should be able to trot out 20 examples. It should just be like ubiquitous. Oh, you can't do that? Okay, well then maybe it's okay, but like everything, all the stars will have to align. Some of it maybe is actually okay. So, we're in meetings all the time. Well, as opposed to what? You want your VPs who are over hundreds of people to do what exactly? Make sales calls? Do support tickets? Write code? I mean, isn't that a complete failure of the organization if that's what they're doing or having to do? So I think if you haven't done it before or it's small, you have this attitude of like, well, you can't manage the thing unless you can do it. And also, if you're not doing it all the time, you kind of lose touch with it. Therefore, good engineering managers write code, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just incorrect. In fact, probably the very best engineering managers I know don't write code. And I mean, haven't in a really long time, maybe ever, but certainly not in a long time. And many of them weren't very good at it when they did, which is part of why they got into management. They realized they were better at people or process or something like that, communication, than they are at writing code. So they know just enough to where, of course, you can't just not know anything about code and be an engineering manager. That's not true. But the idea of like the best engineering manager is the one who's better at writing code than the people they're managing. Not only is that sort of wrong, but it almost guarantees you build a bad organization, right? Because like, shouldn't the job of the manager to be hiring people much better at writing code than the manager? Wouldn't that make a team that's the best at writing code rather than the reverse? Like, it should be just the opposite. The manager should be the worst person. I mean, there's junior developers, of course, but okay, keeping like tenure and years of experience constant. Shouldn't they be the worst? Because otherwise they haven't hired well enough. That should be the attitude, and that should be the attitude, all over the place. The jobs are just very different. So if you're in a meeting all the time and you're talking about these various things, like maybe that's okay. The other thing is, it's definitely the hard question desk thing, and every founder or CEO knows this, even if there's only 3 people at the company, where you don't see the simple, easy things to fix. They're just fixed. They're just handled. You get the hard ones land on your desk, the ones where no one else could solve it or didn't want to, or it took multiple people working on it, they can't agree, and that's why it showed up at your desk. You have the hard question desk. Well, at scale, the hard questions are really, really hard. They're probably a system of equations that have no solution, so someone's going to have to be disappointed. Some kind of trade-offs will really have to be made, or maybe it's just unclear, and maybe the consequences are high, maybe it's a one-way door. There's lots of reasons why this is really scary, and at scale, very, very scary. So you're just dealing with hard things all the time, working across the organization all the time. So that's going to mean meetings probably. And so maybe some of that stuff is inevitable. So not all of it's inevitable, of course, but some of this may be necessary. There's a whole lot of other things about scale that are hard. I'll give you one simple one of those. There's a lot of them. But if you send out an email to 20 people, what's the chance that they all not only read every word, but you wrote so crystal clear that they actually interpreted everything exactly the way you wanted? The chance of the all 20 would do that is 0. In fact, the chance that everyone received it completely is just low. And so, okay, then what do you do to communicate? Not send one email, that's not sufficient. It may be with one other person that you have a great relationship with that normally works out, but not 20. So you have to say it more than once. You also have to say it in person. You also need visuals. You need to repeat it a lot. And then we have 1,200 people, so how many times do you have to do it, and how many ways before 1,200 people know? And is the answer, they will never all know, ever. That's not one of the things that will ever happen. Also, what kind of messages can be distributed to everyone? It's very simple ones, not complicated ones. Only a few of them, not 20 bullet points, maybe 1 point per quarter. Just what is it that you could actually get, And again, that's not about, are we good at communication? Do we have the right processes in place? Are we bad at this? Are we dumb? Are other people dumb? None of that is relevant because that's not what's going on. There's just this, when you're at scale, like these things that are even rare things become common, but also even just these kind of things, they're just happening all the time, and it's not obvious, or it's not trivial to deal with it. And maybe there's a fundamental complexity there that you cannot wave away with a process. That doesn't mean, again, that there's not ways to improve it, etc. Again, then the wider the more number of people that need to know it, the simpler it needs to be, and the fewer of them there can be. Which means you better be able to articulate the most important things very simply, and there better not be that many most important things. Period. Okay, so you see, we're able to look at that and conclude something useful to do. So there is stuff to conclude and do. But the idea that it'll just go away if we just have this culture, or when we get to be 1,000 people, we won't have that communication problem. Yes, you will. It's to me, it's like this fundamental law. So what all is fundamental laws and what's not, and how much can you do, and for what organizations? I'm not so sure, actually. So I can opine about certain things, but ultimately, I don't think there's a silver bullet, or else some of these very smart companies would have them.
You mentioned your writing, Jason. So many people have read your blogs. You seem to release banger after banger of article. You clearly enjoy writing it. What's your process for doing this writing? Are you doing it on WP Engine time? Is it like a personal project for you?
I mean, I was writing before WP Engine, which is why WP Engine exists, because I had the blog, and I would get on Hacker News and it would crash, and I'd ask other bloggers, what do you do to keep WordPress up when you get on Hacker News? And they're like, I don't know, but if you find something, tell me, because I need that. And this is part of the genesis. So I've been writing since before WP Engine. So no, I don't write on WP Engine time, although I guess you could argue that maybe that'd be okay in terms of the exposure, or reasons why people want to join the company, stuff like that. Whenever I have a thought, I throw it into a note, and so at any given time I have literally hundreds of, I call them drafts, but they could be a couple of sentences, or they could be I could be struck by an idea and just type, and 45 minutes later there's a whole post that's probably 70% there, So it's very much inspired, because I'm not a writer. I think at least to me, a writer sits down every day and writes. If you're saying what does a writer do? You sit down and you write. Well, I don't feel like it. Anyways, you're going to sit down and write for 3 hours a day. That to me, that's what a journalist has to do. So what I do is I get, if I sometimes I have the energy for it and I'm prolific, and sometimes I'm not. And so I just try to capture those things. And then what I've been doing for maybe the last year is I alternate. Once a week I put out one that I've written before, and I have the old date on there. It's not a secret, but I just email out to the list an older one, and it says this is pre-published. and then every other week it's a new one, and that spaces them out enough that gives me time. And to your point, like some of them are short, but some of them are thousands and thousands of words and lots of data and diagrams and research. So it varies. And those, of course, take many, many, many hours, dozens of hours. And even so, like, I really should take more time, even so, to continue to edit them. Like, even myself, I'll find typos after I publish it. I'm like, that was silly. But even just turns of phrase, or this is too wordy. So maybe I should even slow down even more, because I'd rather have just each one be as good as I can, and at whatever pace. That's what I prefer. There's other people who will write every day, or, like, you can already do that. I'm not interested in that, right? I'm only interested in something that's either deeper or, just trying to say something new or new-ish or in a new way, or applying a lot of data or examples of things to really make a point, even if it's not a new point, but maybe it's made in a new fashion in a certain way.
I think that's my favorite part about your writing is just you kind of bring up a different point of view that it's almost like it's against the grain in a way, not in a bad way, but it's just it's like the glass half full. It's just a different perspective that I normally wouldn't think about. That I really like that. How do you get the comics to match the post? Do you come up with those?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, I use Andertoons. Every single one is linked back to his website. So he's got, hundreds and thousands of links back to his website for my blog. Each one has a little word credit, I think it says, linking each one. No, but I've been using that all along. I've been using it for 15, 16 years. Yeah. And his name is Mark Anderson. The name of the cartoons is Andertoons. He's got maybe 5,000 of them at this point. And you can go on his website there and just search for words, and it comes with cartoons with that. I actually had a thought that, again, I don't want to bring up AI really, but I tried using the visual thing in ChatGPT, and it's able to see what's in the cartoon and ascertain what's happening and why it's funny. So I thought it might be fun to throw all his cartoons one by one in there and generate text that's more easy to search. And I'll give it back to him. I'll just send it to him. I'm not going to put it online because it's his stuff, but I could use that to search more easily, and I'll just give it to him, and he can do whatever he wants with it. And I've been looking at him for so many years that I remember, there's one about this, and I'll go search for it, but that's because I've been looking at it for over a decade. I also have a file where I keep, because he would put one out a day, and so I would, if I really liked it, I'd throw it into a file. So I also have a file of probably a couple hundreds of my favorites.
Nice.
Sometimes I'll just scroll through there. But yeah, it's definitely an integral part of the style, just because I've been doing it forever. And so that particular style and those things, that's just part of the deal.
No, I love it. Yeah, and just with all this writing, documenting, I mean, I'm sure you're excited to kind of look back at this years from now and kind of read everything that you thought of during that time. But if you look ahead in 2024, and let's say nowadays you have all these different tools at your disposal. Some of these the barrier to entry to a lot of different industries is different. AI is out here. People are now, there's more and more people trying to get online to become successful. Let's call it 0 to $1 million, right? Like I think making $100, $1,000, but $1 million, that's a business, something that can grow. What would you do? Like, I know you have a lot of these things, but how would you think about that right now?
So I think for $1 million a year, content is hard, but it's not necessarily a bad idea, because maybe you could do that enough to quit a day job, and that's enough. But to $1 million a year, you're starting to get into some stratospheric stuff in terms of content makers. So although you can read, this person got 0 to whatever in this newsletter, and so-and-so YouTuber, but when you dig in, you realize almost all the content creators, even the ones that are very popular and get millions of views, they don't make $1 million a year. So if that's your target, I think you have to go with product. I personally would always go B2B, not B2C. B2C has to be cheaper. It's much more noisy to try to get attention. People are fickle. It's much easier to take a business problem, to identify one, to draw a circle around it, to know to segment the market of who really has this, what is their budget, do they already spend money in here, can I interview people like that, do they already buy stuff, can I advertise in a place that they look, do they get a mandate from the company to go buy this, to go solve this? It's just all that stuff exists with B2B, and that's all useful stuff that you want to tap into. So I would start by saying, sort of like we were saying earlier, what is it that I have that I'm bringing to bear in the world? So, I'm better at writing. Okay, well, most people who write code are not. So somehow, you don't have to know right away what that means, but like somehow or another, I should make a company where the fact that I can write well is leveraged. That doesn't mean content company. That's not what that has to mean. But maybe the company does have a good blog, or maybe things like social media or guest posting is a smart way for us to begin marketing. Whereas someone who wasn't good at that, maybe guest posting is a bad way for them to do it because like they're not, it's not going to be good. Whereas if I can make amazing content for a guest blog, I'll be able to in fact guest blog, or I'll be able to go on podcasts and make that a real way to spread the word because I'm so good at it, you know. So that should be a channel I start with. So I mean, I know exactly how it'll manifest, but I want to know like if I'm particularly good at this, or maybe I know that industry. So experience is an asset you could bring, or things that you're passionate about, which again is a good place to begin because it means you're going to stick with it and you care and you're going to work real hard. It's not a business, but it's a good place to begin. So these passions or talents or experience that you've built up, what are those things? I'd want to array those in front of me and identify what they are, because somehow my business needs to leverage these things. Otherwise, why am I even doing it? Why am I even doing it? And also it'll start to help me go, where's my edge, or how will mine be different? It starts to suss it out. That's the first thing I do. Who the fuck am I? The next thing I do is say like, well, there needs to be some like thing I'm doing. Again, problem solve, I would do B2B. Now, as you know, I have one of the more popular posts on this very topic, so I don't have to go into great detail here. But basically, you're going through, not exactly a checklist, but a series of like, are there enough people in the world with the problem? Do they even agree they have the problem? Do they know that? Or are they like, they're like, well, I don't know. Do they want to pay to solve it? Another issue. Do they want to pay a lot to solve it? Are they already paying others? Are a lot of people buying this sort of thing every single month? Can you get in front of them? Or are they locked into contracts or other kinds of things? And so forth. There's all these kinds of things of asking, is that problem really there and can you go get enough of it? Kind of a market question. And there, I think, here's another place where people get hung up because they're like, I want a company, I'll have to go find a problem. And it's just really hard to do that. It's hard to just go in search of a problem. Almost all the companies you hear about, it's like, I had the problem myself, or I was a consultant and I saw this in my clients, or something like that, where there was some reason why you had this insight into this problem. Not typically like, I started from nowhere and I just sort of researched business problems. That's almost never where it comes from. So I feel like, on the other hand, that's not really a prescription of what to do, other than maybe you should be a consultant and try to do things for clients because you might run across problems. So that actually might be. Or you could work at a holdco, for example, where you can see a lot of different companies that have a lot, and ask, ooh, a lot of them have this similar problem in HR or something like that. Interesting, because since it's a holdco, you're seeing many companies at once. So you could think about, what sort of job could I have which would give me exposure to stuff that would then lead to that. That might be a way to get there. Anyway, so there's some way of identifying this problem. Then you can start saying like, all right, so can I solve this problem leveraging these things that I have, these assets, these talents, these passions that I have? Can I do that? Then I would ask, can I find customers that agree? In other words, you're actually calling customers and interviewing them. Here again, I have techniques that I've written about. But basically, you want to be a scientist, meaning you write down your hypotheses about what is their life like, what do they do, what would they pay, why. You write down these hypotheses, and then you interview based on those to try to invalidate them, validate them. And some will be right and some will be wrong, and you'll want to honestly try to suss that out to try to get to this best theory. It's still a theory because half of it will still turn out to be wrong. It's okay, but get your kind of best theory of what's up. Then you go make the product. And you can't help yourself but just make the product anyway. You probably shouldn't, but it's very hard not to because that's the fun part. Everything else I just said is actually not very fun. The fun part is building stuff. So people generally go build stuff, but also generally it doesn't work out. So there you go. But so, okay, probably what will happen is you'll build it in parallel to all this because you can't help yourself. So fine, but it better be in parallel or else you're just building a personal side project that nobody wants. That's what you're doing. And so it really isn't the way to build a company. So anyway, there's more after that because, what do you do next? But that's how it gets started, and just like from idea and me and to like, how do I've gotten to some sort of product that I should be building.
Some harsh truths there from Jason Cohen. What do you think of side projects? Do you think they're like generally good for people to do, to try to learn things?
Learn what things?
So side projects, you're saying if you're just going to build something, then that's just a side project that no one's going to use, or side projects can be good for learning tools, techniques, softwares.
Obviously, it is. Like, they're great. We're just not going to pretend like you're building a company, right? I think a lot of the build in public stuff is a side project where you're pretending you're building a company. So I'm just saying, like, of course that's fine, but that's not making progress towards building a company.
I couldn't agree more. You see this a lot. The false positives of building in public and building an audience and getting to a certain level of MRR with your product that is because of the audience, not because of the product or the market. I wanted to get your thoughts on Lemon Squeezy and where this is. I don't know if you have been seen what's gone on with Lemon Squeezy recently, but JR and I did a episode where we talked about funding and Lemon Squeezy's decision to turn down funding at a $50 million valuation. It has been huge growth, so it almost seemed like raising funding was an obvious next step. But JR went through the process, got term sheets on the table, and ultimately decided not to raise, but keep the door open for future. I think that's you're nodding away, potentially a smart move for future.
The later you can raise or never, the better. Ooh. Like the status quo for all companies is that you're not going to raise, first of all, because almost nobody does. So just mathematically, most people don't. So that's the status quo. So to me, the question is always, under what circumstances are you that few percent of companies that should? I mean, it's a good question. Like, it's not like no one should. Of course, some people should. Tesla had to raise money. It costs a lot of money to make a car. The first car costs a lot of money, right? Like, of course, Also, they're not going to be incremental and agile, right? That's silly too. So, of course, there's always circumstances where raising money is the right one. So, to me, that's the question. Under what circumstances is it right to raise money? Because the default answer is that you shouldn't. So, especially if you don't have to. There you go. That's actually, ironically, not a bad reason to raise money, because if you don't have to, then that means the terms would be such that's very favorable, and that makes it a little bit more interesting. So that's, ironically, that's one of the things. But the biggest thing about raising money is you get put on a path where there's only one kind of outcome for the company that your investors are interested in. And every other path they're not interested in. They're not interested in selling at some amount that's less than $1 billion. They may not even be interested in selling at $1 billion. They also have a timeline. What is the timeline? Generally depends on how old the fund is. But it's going to be between 3 and 7 years. And now we're talking about rough ranges, but that's roughly the range where they're going to want to get out of the company and they're going to need something else to happen, like some different investor buys them out, or you go public, or you get sold, or etc. And so there's going to be some kind of moment coming up where that needs to happen. There's going to be that activity, which has nothing to do with your company, obviously, has to do with investors getting money. And so often they will push the company to grow as fast, be as valuable as possible, even if that causes more risk to the overall success of the company. And that is good for their portfolio, but bad for everyone at the company, the founders and all the employees, because it doesn't maximize the chance that those founders, those employees, that company is successful. It's a classic case of, the word in economics is ergodicity, but the idea is like Russian roulette. So if I said, like, all right, let's play Russian roulette, and the deal is, like, I'll give you $1 million if you pull the trigger and don't die. You want to play? And no, because there's a 1/6 chance that you're dead.
Our odds aren't great. So,
no. Now I'll say this. All right, I'm telling you right now, there are 6 people playing Russian roulette individually, all at the same time. They've decided to play. They're crazy, I guess. You can get a percentage of their winnings, though, if you want to place some money down. Now, do you want to place some money down? And you're like, sure, because I know like 1, maybe 2 will die and the rest will win. And so if I have a portfolio of Russian roulette, I'm going to win a lot because only a few will die. So same game, same math, but if I have a portfolio of it, if I have a lot of at-bats, and if any one event doesn't kill me, it kills other people but not me, it's very logical for me to play Russian roulette like that. But for any one person, where it's not logical at all for them to play Russian roulette. So the VCs, so you raising the money are playing Russian roulette, except the odds are worse because it's not a 1/6 chance that you'll die. It's higher than that. But also the rewards could be very high. So you're playing Russian roulette, and so for you it's like, I only get to pull this trigger once. I don't know about that. Whereas the VC is like, oh good, I'm pulling this trigger 10 to 20 times per fund. This is very logical to me. Same, and so that fancy word ergodicity is the mathematical term for this, meaning that what happens on average in a group, like for the VC, what happens on average is good. But for each individual player, they don't get the average result. They get some violent result. They don't.
Yeah.
Their result is not the average, so it's different. There are other kinds of games where it is true that the individual person and the portfolio have the same kind of payoff, you might say. Those games do exist as well. In those cases, there's no difference and it's fine. But the case of a startup and a VC is not ergodic, as you would say, and that is tension. But it's not a tension if you want to play that game and say, yeah, but if I succeed as a founder, maybe I'll make $100 million, maybe I'll make $1 billion. And so I want that trade. Let's go. Because by the way, in my life, I'm not actually dead. This project's dead or this project's not as much. I have more bullets in my life. So actually I am playing that. And so hell yeah, I want to like go big or die because YOLO. And that's a perfectly rational thing to think. Perfectly rational. Just to be clear. It's just different personalities and different desires. No one's right or wrong. It's just different. So to me, you raise money when the market is huge and growing, and so it's possible for the company to get big. And you have reasons to believe this company could do it. Your reasons to believe is you're already doing it. It's the best reason of all. Okay, so you got that. And you want to play that Russian roulette game because, well, it could be for whatever reason, but like whatever reason you want to. Oh, well then you should raise money because that will be the best way to play that particular game of super high rewards, but there's a lot of risk. And then we drive to that. But you're like, but that's what I want. I want the biggest possible company. That's what I want. Like, oh, well then you're aligned. Go for it. Like, let's go. Then put more money in the bank and apply it toward that dream because that's what you should do for that dream. So as usual, the choices are about fitting everything, all the decisions being a self-reinforcing fit together. Oh, we all want the same things and this all has the same kinds of trade-offs. Hooray. That's what you're looking for in raising money. Now, in your case, you're like, wait, I'm growing so fast I don't know what to do. Everything's happy. I'm not even sure that I need to do anything with the money anyway. And right now you're in complete control of everything, and you're in control of the brand and culture and who you hire. And if things do stumble or change in future, or you want to think about profit this much or growth that much, or you do want to go into this other area or you don't want to, you can just decide that.
It sounds so simple, but yeah.
You know? And like nothing's wrong, so like why would I not want to just decide that? And again, I just gave you an answer. Well, if ... well then, but it's all if. And so if the answer is well,
exactly.
Then I don't want to. I'm like, right. Well, remember the status quo is don't do it. It's only if all these other things are that you go. Oh well, if all those things, then I'll break the status quo and do the thing because that's.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? And maybe this is a selfish thing I'm doing, but now that we're talking about it, I'm going to ask you. So let's just say over the next 12 months, we don't intend to raise. We're growing really well. And you're trying to get from the millions and millions to the tens and 20 millions. Do you remember back then, and I know this is maybe hard to answer because you don't have all the, the questions or the answers to the insights of Lemon Squeezy, but what are the things that you would recommend that you would focus on or that you did focus on or that, to help you get there?
You mean in terms of growth or in terms of the organization or something like that?
Growth, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there's a generic answer to how to grow a company. I think you have to zoom into your case of like, well, in what cases are you easily growing? What kinds of customers? What are their problems? Are they small ones? Is there a vertical? Is it startups versus companies that are established? Like, where's your sweet spot? Because usually you want to double down on whatever is working. That's like thing one is like more of that. But at the same time, there's always some carrying capacity of like, well, that's how much there is of that, or at least per month. That's how much there is of that per month. That's all the Google ads we can run. Right? That's as a simple example. But even if it's stuff like, we do really well with new companies because we have such an accessible brand, and so they're like, yay, we love you, you're like us. But they go out of business fast, and so while we get a good number of those, they also go out of business quickly, and so we're kind of doing our best. That we sort of need to like crack open the next segment or something. So that's then the next thing is if you have this bullseye where you have this best customer there, there's usually some other rings, just being very hand wavy about it, of segments and groups and even product types that are adjacent. And so the idea is like, what are those where like that's the next thing I should go focus a lot of my my resources on, meaning human beings and their time and of course money and direct spend on things and so on. And so the way I think about adjacencies, and I also think about this, by the way, earlier when we were saying how do we launch another product, I think of it the same way for that. So it's sort of just a general, very simple way to think about this, but very effective. Is I think about that there's these buckets of things the company does, and you can pick your own buckets, but very broadly there'll be things like service and support, sales, marketing, product, engineering, in our case infrastructure because it's such a huge part of what we do, maybe finance if it's complicated, maybe in your case there's something like that, the payments, something about the payments infrastructure, I don't know. Whatever, just the buckets where like there's a whole department around it, or it's just a lot of experience and activity and stuff that's there, right? And then you say for a new idea such as a new customer segment you could go after, or a new product you could launch, you go to these buckets and you ask for each one, for this new thing, for this bucket, is this something where with small incremental shifts, we're just rocking and rolling already? Like we would just adjust some bullets in the salesperson's, just a couple of bullets in their slides, give them a little training, they're done. It's in service. It's like we're just going to bring them together and say, hey, we added this to the homepage. And they're like, oh, and we're done. Like, is it like that? Okay, so that's the easy. And then medium is like, no, we're going to need to like some new materials. We're going to need some training. It's going to take some people some time to ramp up, but like that. Okay, so they call that medium. And then hard is like, I don't think we have the right people. Like we're not going to train our people. We're going to need to hire something. So an example might be, let's sell in different, in a different continent. Okay, we're going to need to hire people in another continent. We don't have, we might need a leader too who's done that before because now all kinds of other things are up here. Oh, so, so that's a whole other team. Or, okay, maybe our engineers can do it, but none of them have done it before. So it's good. So if we do it and we don't hire people, it's going to take like a year or two longer than it might take some other team, and we're going to have to learn, and half of it's not going to work, and we're going to have to iterate. So it's okay, but it's just like it's that much of an effort, is what you're saying. So again, I'm staying away from estimating everything and expense. I'm staying away from that because like not getting into too much detail here because that makes it easier. But that's what I mean by like hard or transformative is a word I like. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my God, it's going to be completely different in some like really hard way. So each bucket you just rank it as like incremental, easy. Yeah, we can do it, but like it's going to take a little time. And You don't make a score. You don't have to add it up. Don't do that shit. Just you're going to immediately start seeing like, okay, so the nice thing about this idea is it's going to be really hard for engineering because we have to build a new thing. But for everyone else, it's like, oh, please do that. I could sell that today. Mm-hmm. So, right? And so we're like, oh, since it's mostly good and the area where it's hard, we accept, or like we're willing to invest in the part where it's hard, so therefore we accept. Or maybe some other idea, nothing's hard, and you're like, well, there you go. But maybe the upside of that's not very good. And you're like, well, it wouldn't be too hard, but like we need something more transformative than that. Right? Maybe something else would be super transformative, but you look and you're like, okay, too many things would have to go right. Like every time you say hard, that's a thing that might not go right. It's going to be expensive, it's going to be slow, it won't work at first. There'll be a false start, a false hire, So if you have like 4 of those, you're like, dude, how much stuff has to go perfectly right for this to work? I don't know, man. This is just not adjacent, is how I would conclude. Not adjacent. Right. It's too far afield from who we are, what we're able to do. It might be a wonderful idea. It's just too far away from us. It'd be practically like doing a new startup again, which is not a good idea because we should leverage what we have. So it's kind of another way of saying leverage what you have, very simply, But it's a very particular, but still straightforward way. And often people agree on the levels, so like you don't have to get into lots of analysis. You can, and if they don't agree, and one person's like, "That's super hard," someone else is like, "No, it's not." That's a great discussion to have. Oh, we have different assumptions, or we don't mean the same thing when we say it. So that kind of discussion at that level of granularity, beautiful discussion to have. Good reason to have a meeting. Clarify that. Wonderful. Yeah. So I feel like it's the kind of the right level of how much you debate and how much analysis you do. And again, there's no rule about like if you score an 8, then it's no. But it kind of helps you evaluate: is this adjacent? and maybe very roughly how much investment and risk is it, very roughly, right? So that is part of an answer. Like, well, how do we grow? Okay, well, what segments do you see? We could go sell in other geographies. We could add these other features, but that would we could partner with other people to bring in certain things. Maybe that's a different way that has its own risks and stuff. But so that'd be a way though to like very roughly evaluate what are different ways we could grow, what things, and like which of these might make sense for us. But generally, you want to start with whatever's strong. Do more of that, and then what's adjacent to that? Let's do that, because we're leveraging certain things we've built up, and so therefore it makes sense for us.
Jason, I want to we're just running out of time. I want to round off on one question, one topic about what's the end goal with WP Engine for you? Where do you go? Do you IPO? What happens now? Do you just continue solving puzzles and grow?
Well, again, fortunately, we're growing and profitable. So fortunately, there's no gun at our heads, and so that's nice. And generally speaking, if you're at scale and profitable, there are possibilities, and so that's all the good news. And of course, there's a lot of companies who did things like raise money that they shouldn't have or at the wrong valuations. We didn't do any of that stuff. We never raised money at stupid valuations. We never raised too much money. We have really high quality investors in terms of their experience and their attitude and their ability to help. So fortunately, we did all those things right. And the last time we raised, by the way, was 2017. So, just put it in perspective. So we did raise a lot then, but we were profitable and growing and didn't raise these crazy. So we did it in an intelligent way, and therefore we're not in a bad place. But to, I guess, directly answer your question, IPO is. Right now it's a bad time because the markets are just harsh. So yeah, that's always the kind of thing that's a possibility. But right now it's very few people are talking about that just because of the nature of the markets. And then the other ways are things like private equity and a large company buying, like a large company, because buying the company. And that's been the answer probably for at least 6 years of we're at a scale where those are the kinds of things that happen. So I do say, and I have said this at Smart Bear and WP Engine, so for 20 years. And I said it even at the very early days of WP Engine, as well as now, which is the best answer to that that anyone can do with their company is you want to maximize the options that you have, including don't sell, right? Don't sell, don't raise. Those are options. You want to maximize the number of options available to you, the menu available to you, so that you can pick how you want and whatever terms you want. You don't have to sell for bad terms. You don't have to raise money if you don't want, right? Or you're kind of in control, in other words, and so you can do whatever it is that you want. Optionality means you're in control. So how do you build optionality? It's simple to say, you build a great company, then all the options are available to you. What does a great company mean? It's growing at a good clip, it's profitable, the customers are happy as evidenced by they come and stay. The employees are happy as evidenced by they come and stay. Maybe you even have a few other metrics like CSAT or, I don't like NPS, but something like that, or same thing with your own employees. So maybe you have a few other ways of measuring those concepts, but the concept is clear, even if numbers are a little harder, which I bet that they are. But the concept, though, we can still say what the concept is. We want people to be happy and stay and grow here. We want customers to be happy and grow here and stay. Yeah, and have good gross profit margins, all the usual metrics. We want them to be good. No kidding. It's not even like it's rocket science, but that's what I mean by a good company, these things. Many of them have metrics or at least proxy metrics, so fine. And if you do that, then you have just like you currently are. Well, if we're growing and profitable, which you are, I assume are, then you can raise money or you don't. Or like you said, well, maybe we don't. Maybe in 6 months we change our mind. Or maybe in a year we find a kind of investor which we're like, okay, wait, for that's different. What? Okay, I haven't heard of that one before. Maybe that. Or maybe someday you want secondary because you look around and say, well, we're a private company. We've had people here for 8 years. They have stock. We really would like them to get some kind of paid. But we don't want to go public and we don't want to sell. So maybe we should take on an investor, not because we need the money to grow, not because we want to but because we want to do secondary for the founders and for key employees or older employees, et cetera, et cetera. But that's going to be on our terms. We're going to not relinquish any control for that. You may not even have a board seat, or okay, maybe it is, but blah 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 blah. Stuff that where you stay in control the whole time because this is your own type of thing. So that's what Atlassian did, And that's what 37 Signals did. Everyone says, oh, 37 Signals, such a great example of bootstrapping. Did you forget that they raised money to do secondary? They did. But it was on their terms to do this da-da-da-da. And they raised it from people like Jeff Bezos who are like, I don't care if I see that again. Well, okay, so that's available? It is for certain kinds of companies. You know, all kinds of things might be available. Who knows? Like, interesting. How do you do that? You build a good company, and then it's not that literally anything's possible, but you've maximized your optionality,
right,
which maximizes what is possible, which de-risks the company overall. You know, and so as silly, as straightforward as it is to say, it's like that is actually the right thing to do, even if you're like someday maybe I'll sell. Okay. Here's how you should think about that today, because you shouldn't build to sell. That's a bad idea. You should build a great company that has options. And one of those options will be to sell on terms that you don't hate, if you so choose. Yeah.
It's a lovely way to put it.
It's been a pleasure. I mean, I'm big fan. I'm just glad you're here. I mean, I think it's been a good conversation.
Fun to be here. Thanks for having me on. It's fun. It's fun talking to folks who are really getting it, and it's really cool.
Jason, it's funny too, because I told that story on that Twitter space, right, where I was sitting at WordCamp San Francisco in 2010, sitting next to Ben Metcalf, refreshing that dashboard, and I never really got to know you, but through all the years of me being in WordPress, but obviously been a big fan, love everything you're doing, and congrats to you as well on all the success. It's crazy. Two unicorns is absolutely crazy, and so we would love to have you back on, and I'd love to just chat anytime I can get your ear. So. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that'd be fun. Maybe you'll let me invest. Yeah, sure, at a $200 million valuation. Right?
No, but I think I do think, Jason, that's part of it, right? Is like, that was a big thing that I said when I did my episode, which is the brand of the firm was like the last thing on my mind. But the number one thing was kind of that partner that just got it, right? Like I was an operator at PayPal for 10 years, and I was like, well, that's awful because I don't like the way PayPal's ran. So I actually don't want you to invest, so it's all like, I mean, the fact that you've done it and you've done it at these different scales and the spaces you've been in it's intriguing for sure. So,
and anyone you pick would have, I think my little opinion would be, they would have to really value your style and culture. To me, that's a big aspect of why is this quote unquote fintech different? To me, it's just a huge aspect to it. And a lot of times you find investors who do understand that that's part of your success. And so they're like, oh, yeah. But you can tell that they see it almost like a tool, or, we have to keep that because it gets people to sign up. You know what I mean? Like, they see it as this utility or this transactional quid, So they value it in quotes because they see that it's important for your success. But that's not the same way that you value it. As opposed to the investor that's like, if I invest, you have to promise never to change that no matter how big you get. And then you go, what? And they're like, listen, you guys probably know, but in case you don't, this DNA is so critical. It's so who you are. It's a reason to join the company. It's a reason to join it as a customer or an employee. It's who you are. You aren't you if that ever happens. It's such a huge advantage, and it's just who you are. You must, like, this is, and as you scale, you're going to have to figure out how to not lose that, and that will not be easy, and you'll have to invest in that. Do you understand that? And if the investor's telling you that, wait, you want me to use your investment dollars in part to invest in keeping this part of it? Okay, like, that doesn't mean I want to take on money because of all the other things we listed, but I'm at least hearing you out now. Like, you're at least the human being that you passed the human being test. What? So to me, like, that would have to be part of it. And what's nice is that's a great gate, because that will slam the gate on 90% of them. But I'll tell you what, like, our PE firm, Silver Lake, that invested in us in 2017, PEs are the last people you'd think who'd understand that. That's the kind of conversations we were having before they invested.
Wow.
And it's like,
and Silver Lake's, they're a big brand. They're very well known.
Oh, I mean, tens of billions of dollars under management. They're massive. and yet that's what they're coming in with, and it's like, oh my
Wow.
gosh, you guys really get it, because you get every aspect. You get the human culture side, and of course the other side, right? And so, holy moly, that's what. So they're there, even though it's like, are anything like that? Well, not a lot, sure, but also they're there. So it's a great filter, because you can easily quickly say no to most anybody, right? It's nice.
Exactly.
Not that I'm saying you should even try. It's just, it's fun to
Right.
think about under what circumstances is a fun thing, and yeah, allows you to eliminate people real fast.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, alright.